All right, so today we're jumping into a really fascinating book. It's a biography that's way more than just a life story. For its author, it's practically a sacred text. We're talking about Colonel BO HI PAK's Messiah. This thing covers a wild, explosive decade for Reverend Sun Myung Moon, and it's all told through the eyes of a man who was absolutely convinced he was watching the second coming of Christ. And you really have to get this one point, because it's the key to the entire book. Colonel Pak wasn't just an aide or an interpreter. He saw himself as an apostle. So every event we're about to explore, every single political battle, every legal challenge, is seen through this lens of just total, absolute, unwavering faith. So let's set the scene. It's the 1970s. Reverend Moon lands in the United States, and he's got what he believes is a divinely appointed mission. And right there by his side is Colonel Pak, his chief interpreter, ready to chronicle every single moment of what would become a really turbulent and absolutely pivotal decade for his movement. Now, in Pak's telling, this was never just some speaking tour. In their theology, America was the second Israel, a nation that God had chosen to be the launching pad for saving the entire world. So Moon's mission was to rescue it from what he saw as moral rot and, the ultimate enemy, communism. For them, this was everything. The stakes were sky high. But of course, a mission this big is going to run into some major pushback. And the way Pak frames it, this wasn't just a simple political fight. No, this was a spiritual war. A war being fought on two fronts. One against the earthly powers in Washington, D.C., and another against what he truly believed were demonic forces pulling the strings behind the scenes. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. You've got these two totally separate realities clashing. On one side, you have the U.S. Congress digging into this political scandal they called Koreagate. But through Pak's eyes, this has nothing to do with politics. It's a full-on satanic assault meant to stop God's plan in its tracks. It's like they're living in two completely different universes.
And Pak really goes into detail here. He paints the head of the investigation, Representative Donald Frazier, as basically an unwitting puppet for these dark spiritual forces. You have to understand, for the movement, this wasn't just politics. It felt like a personal assault. It was a trial by fire that, funny enough, would only end up making their beliefs even stronger.
So things just keep ramping up, right? And it all leads to what is, without a doubt, the most dramatic and, for them, the most theologically important event in the whole book. A massive legal battle that would do something that was once unthinkable. It would put the man they called the Messiah behind the bars of a federal prison. You can just see how relentless the legal machine was. It all kicks off in '82 with the indictment and then the conviction. Then, for 2 years, they fight it. But in 1984, the Supreme Court says, nope, we're not hearing it. And that sealed his fate. He was headed to prison in Danbury, Connecticut.
And look, we're not talking about a slap on the wrist here. 13 months. For 13 months, the leader of this massive global religious movement was an inmate. That stark number became the undeniable physical proof at the very center of their whole story of being persecuted.
So what was this whole legal fight actually about? Well, it all came down to a pretty simple question. Was the money in Reverend Moon's bank accounts his personal income that he had to pay taxes on? Or was it church money that he was just holding in his name? The government said it was personal. But for Pak and the church, that was ridiculous. They argued that Moon was the church. You couldn't separate them. They called the whole thing a legal assassination, cooked up to crush their faith.
Okay, but here's where the story takes a really wild and fascinating turn. Because for most people, having your leader thrown in jail looks like a catastrophic defeat. But for the movement, it was reframed as this profound spiritual victory. The imprisonment wasn't a failure. It was a necessary, even crucial part of God's plan.
Now, to get what happens next, you have to understand this one key theological idea, indemnity. Basically, it's this idea that a price has to be paid for past sins, not just your own, but sometimes for historical failures too. So with this way of thinking, suffering isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. Actually, it's the opposite. It's validation. It's proof that you're on the right track, paying off some kind of essential spiritual debt.
And boom, that's exactly how they saw this whole prison sentence. In their eyes, Reverend Moon's suffering in that Danbury prison cell, that was him paying the price for the sins of American Christianity, for its failure to recognize him. His imprisonment wasn't a punishment. It was a crucifixion for the modern age that actually redeemed the nation and allowed the mission to keep going.
But they weren't just going to sit back and take it, right? Oh no. They went on the offensive, launching this incredibly sophisticated counterattack.
They started building huge institutions designed to fight back and, most importantly, to seize control of their own story.
They basically launched this three-pronged counterattack. First, they jumped into the media game by founding the Washington Times, a major conservative newspaper right in D.C. Second, they mobilized allies, getting thousands of ministers from other churches to support them by framing this as an attack on all religious freedom. And third, they went cultural, using groups like the famous Little Angels Ballet to project this wholesome, positive image around the world.
So after walking through all that drama, what do we make of the book itself? What is Messiah? Because it's obviously so much more than a simple diary. It's a really carefully built historical document, and it's also a theological argument, all written with a very clear purpose.
And that really gets us to the big question, the one you have to ask yourself when you read this. Is this book an objective history of what happened, or is it what you'd call a hagiography, a biography of a saint written only to glorify them?
And the answer is, well, it's kind of both, isn't it? As a piece of history, the book is an incredible treasure trove. It's packed with primary sources, internal memos, speeches. It gives you a look inside the movement that you just can't get anywhere else. But at the same time, yeah, it is absolutely a hagiography. It's a story where Reverend Moon can do no wrong, all his enemies are basically demonic, and every single event, good or bad, is just part of God's perfect plan.
At the end of the day, I think this quote just nails it. The book is Colonel Pak's offering of fidelity. It's not really a history, and it's not just a biography. It is the ultimate story from a true believer, a chronicle of the man he was absolutely certain was the Messiah, a testament to a faith that was tested by fire and, in their eyes, came out stronger than ever.